Okay. We might as well start this process. I've already sat here and done all of the other player characters. After this is pseudo player characters, which I'll explain what that is when I get to them. But might as well. Deimos here. And his horse. Like I said, Deimos has the most stuff. He just has the most stuff going on. Oh man, this one's going to be a little longer. So, Deimos, let's see here. I used, it's not Zartan. It sounds like Zartan. There's that newer G.I. Joe classified character. And he has, but he had boots, and they were a similar color, a similar design to what I wanted, right? He's got spurs, which I removed from, that's from a Fortnite character, that one that's made out of pancakes. Stupid Fortnite guy. But I cut notches into the back of the boot, glued them in, that way that they're harder to break off. I could have just glued them, to the outside, but they might break off all the time. I had already gotten 2 of this guy's legs. So I had already attempted to make the boots the right length for different pants so that I wasn't just using so much of this guy. And I probably still have to go in here to the knee pads. I've been debating. The knee pads still have a lot of detailing on them that look kind of modern, and I want to knock that back, well, to the 1800s. But I have, because he has this rounded armor here, right? And I incorporated that into the design, and I cut off the rounded armor from the other boots. I added it to the underneath on both sides. This belt has traveled through every single version of Deimos that I've done. This is a Deathlock belt. I don't remember where the holster came from, or these bullets. Let's see, the scarf came from the same guy the legs came from. It was pink. I've painted it blue. I'm hoping eventually Classified puts out a blue one. That way I don't have to keep repainting it, because you can see that some of the pink is already coming back through. And that's the problem. That's always been the problem with Deimos, is I make him, and then because there's so much paint involved and so much stuff, there's all this fabric, rubbing back and forth. What ends up happening is he gets all weird and gummy, and the paint starts coming off, and I hate it. So I'm trying to get every piece on this guy to be the base color that they need to be. Right? So this is a continuing journey. I have Duke torso on underneath there, and when the new Flint comes out, he's on the Duke body with the double rocker and the butterfly joints and everything. I'm going to swap it out immediately. That's the plan, because he has a black torso, and I'm going to swap it out. Now, originally, the color scheme was gray shirt, black pants. I ended up modifying that, because it doesn't really matter which one's what for this design. I ended up modifying that. This worked better with the parts that are available. The arms and the heads, this head and the cowboy hat head with the smoke, these are Spirit Iron Knife. Because it matches the skin tone, all of his skin tone matches, and I sculpted the beard. I added the hat here from Old Man Logan. Leave that out. The hands are from Agent Venom. I took all of the Agent Venom hands. all of them, and I sculpted his back plate on there, which is a reference to when I originally designed Deimos. It was way before the Western. I designed him as a Mandalorian. So I had this. We had this space campaign, right? And I wanted to do a Mandalorian, but I didn't want it to be too on the nose that he was a Mandalorian. So I was like, well, Star Wars is a space western. That Din Djarin is just a cowboy, right? He's just Clint Eastwood. So I designed him, to be kind of a cowboy. And he still originally had like Star Wars elements to his armor and such. And when I designed him like that, Brett came to me and was like, hey, I've been wanting to redesign gun mechanics anyway. It'd probably be really cool for a campaign based around, a Western. I was like, that would be really cool. And so we used Deimos as the tester to see how that would work in D&D. And he's the reason the Western exists at all. And every time that I've rebuilt him, every time I've redrawn him, I've changed the design, I've tweaked it, I've made it work. Because originally he had chest armor, I just couldn't make removable chest armor work on a figure, and so eventually I got rid of it. I've redesigned his shoulder pads 100 times, trying to make them removable too. I finally just, these ones don't remove. I just gave up. I'll just get him a different coat at some point, and he'll have one with shoulder pads and one without. This plate is removable. And then he's got another armored glove that goes on the other side. I wanted them to be different. I have very specific plans for the armor. All right, so accessory time. He has a little pet who I'm sure won't, come back to bite the party later. There's no way. I mean, nobody knows what this is. Deimos doesn't know what this is. None of the characters know what this is. He magnetically attaches to Deimos's hat, because Western trope, softened by a baby creature, and I'm sure that there's no ominous thing that's happening with this baby creature. So, I've got other heads. So it's funny, I picked these heads for Deimos because of the color matching, because every time I paint heads, eventually the paint messes up, because it doesn't matter how good your custom is, it doesn't matter how good your paint is, if you play with it regularly, constantly, it's gonna come off. Like, unless you put it in a glass case, even official figures, you're still gonna scrape paint off, right? I got these from Collectible Carnage on eBay. These are Ultimate Spider-Man heads. So these are Peter Parker heads from the new Ultimate Spider-Man. So I have that one with the right. Go further back. Yeah, I have that one with the gritted teeth. I have this damaged one, this beat up one. And I've went in, I've carved in his scarring. And then I just have the normal one. These particular scars come from a bear. When he was a child, he helped fend off a bear from taking out a Native American girl. There's that creature again. This was the first one I made. Again, there's absolutely no reason to think that anything bad will happen. I have an extra hat This is for him to like hold when he doesn't have the head on. I took Logan's cards so I can have him play poker. He has his gun in his holster, and he's got tomahawks, which are important based on his history and such. I took the Indiana Jones bone, femur bone, because it matches him, doesn't it? Does that not match his whole thing? I have a ton of classified firing effects. Just an absolute ton of them. I've got the Marvel Legends smoke effects, and they all fit in his gun. When I designed his gun is also important. So when I designed his gun, this is a 3D printed gun. And I took the nozzle off of a classified, like the very end of the barrel off a classified. I carved this off, put it in there, and now it fits all of the Marvel Legends and classified effects. It took me forever to finally paint this, too. This was originally just black, and I was just worried about scraping off all the paint every time I put it in the holster or his hand. But I went ahead and I finally did it. We'll see how that holds up. It's not loose, but it's not super tight in there, so it might hold up. Bottle of alcohol. This is my first character that has all these little vices like alcohol and smoking and stuff like that. I normally don't design my characters to do that. Now, I took this hand. It's got that little ID. I'm going to repaint that to be another playing card. That way I have multiple of that. You can pose it more often. And then I have these little green effects because that's a big deal for... There's a hair on there. That's a big deal for Deimos. In fact, now let's get in the big box. That's the effect from the McFarlane Green Lantern Batman. I have Mysterio's smoke effects. I have the Power Rangers, what's her name? Cammy? Yeah, Power Rangers Cammy kick effect. Basically anything green and translucent, I save. I've ordered the classified crystal ball just for his accessories. I actually had a Mysterio skull for him at one point. Yeah, a Mysterio skull for him at one point. I have these Loki hands. That I had taken the Mysterio skull, and I've taken it a couple of times. So here's a helmet, and you can start to see what's going on here with the armor. I'll be explaining that in a minute. We're still going through accessories. This fits on the end of his gun too. I drilled a hole in there so that I can have other effects other than, just the firing effects, just the green ones. I got a ton. Absolute ton. Just continue making this giant... this giant pile of green. I have these effects too. I don't use these very often, but I do have them. Because when I have a main character, I tend to save all of that stuff and use it constantly. I've even got a few extra weapons here that'll become important later. Alright, I have one of those that I've made green too. So, a couple of scythes and a spear. which I'll explain. Fire effect. Lots of stuff. Crazy amount of stuff. I also have an alternate torso. Whole full ultimate torso. You can see all the scarring happening. This was a Namor torso. I modified it to be able to plug onto the classified ball joint. The only downside is it makes him very slightly shorter, which is, not cool, but when I have this torso on him, it's normally a sitting down picture, Lots of stuff. Oh, there's another green one. All right. That's not even everything in his boxes. That's just everything that's around. Because I also have these gripping hands. Because these are for the tomahawks. These are from the last version of the character, which is why the rust looks different. It's a little more dulled. So, Deimos is the first character for the Western. He is the character for the Western, and he is full of Western tropes. He's full of other tropes, too. He has a long history, and he's not even that old. It's just a series of, spent a couple years doing this, spent a couple years doing that. And honestly, he works better as an NPC. Obviously, I'll be DMing the Western going forward, and so I won't be playing Deimos anymore, but I'll still be playing Deimos, that's just going to be the thing. So, Deimos is actually from Paradise, the town that the setting is in. He's from this town, and I explained in the intro video that the town is unwelcoming to newcomers. That they're in the middle of losing all of their water, their food, their funds. It's a town that's dying out. It's on the verge of becoming a ghost town. New generations have abandoned the town, so there's just a lot of older people living there now. There's very few people that are young that are still in the town. Deimos is the name that he has chosen. It wasn't his original name. Under his original name, he was born in Paradise and lived for the first 14, 15 years of his life. His father had bought land out west, and they came from around the Virginia area. His father is a Spaniard, and he left a very influential family. He abandoned them because they didn't approve of his young wife, who was Greek. And so they moved away. They ran away from the East Coast to start their new life. They didn't realize that it was going to be a very hard life. They didn't realize that not only did they have to put in the work of building a farm, building their house, doing all of this work, that the town was going to ostracize them, that the town was going to jeer at them, that the town was going to belittle them for being new, for not being from the town's genealogies. And around the time that Deimos was 10, his father mysteriously died. They never really knew how or why, and nobody really seemed to help them. So Deimos, from the time he was 10, was the one making the farm function. And to keep them fed, to keep them surviving, his father had taught him how to run the farm. His father had taught him how to hunt. And so he went into the Black Forest to hunt, which was also a big no-no for the villagers. There's them evil natives in there. And it was believed that if you could go in and out of the forest at will, that you must be working with the natives, and it was this whole thing, right? Well, one day when he was in the forest, he happened upon a bear attack. There was this bear attacking this young native girl, and so he saved her, and he took her back to her village. And that was it. That's it was just I did this thing. They took down the bear together. But Deimos ended up permanently scarred on this side of his face. The idea here is that the bear swiped down, nicked the bone, the cheekbone, and then it swerved, took out some chunks of his ear here. These other two scars are much smaller because those wouldn't have been as deep. It's this middle one that's the main one, the claw that sticks out more. But that would end up coming back later. Because there was mounting pressure to make them leave. See, the area is overrun with bandits and seedier characters, and so they were getting constant visitors. It's like, hey, we'll buy this land from you. You're not using it. It's basically useless. It's barren. Nothing's growing here. Might as well sell us the land, just constantly, over and over and over. And they kept refusing because this, the mother kept refusing. This is her husband's land. They left everything to come here, and she has nowhere to go. There's nowhere to go back to. There is no way for her to go home. She left everything to come here with her husband and make a new life. And so now she's stuck here. So one night when Deimos comes home from the forest, the people weren't taking no for an answer anymore. And they lynched his mother. Hung her from a tree in the side yard. And Deimos tried to attack the people with his bow, and it didn't. Well, first off, that didn't work. There's like 6 guys, and they've all got guns. Deimos tried to run back to the forest and got pelted with bullets all across his back. That's where a lot of these scars on the body come from. In fact, on the back, you can see these rounder scars all over the backs of his arms and his back where he got shot. But the native tribes sees everything. They live in that forest. That forest is theirs. And they owed a debt to Deimos. So they took him to their village and they nursed him back to health. They saved him. They used their special mystical medicines to make sure that he didn't die. But now Deimos had lost everything. Everything was gone. He had already lost his father, but he lost him at an age where it didn't really hit, right? And his mother had been taken from him. So Deimos seeks revenge. That's all he can think about day and night. That's all he wants. He wants revenge. He wants to go and he wants to make them pay. And he doesn't want to just make those people that directly did it pay. He wants the village to pay. He wants the town to pay. He wants everyone to pay. How dare they continue to live while his mother is dead? After they took everything from him, offered no amount of help, ostracized him. You know, he had actually made a friend in the town, and then was forced to stay away from her. And because of the backlash, she even stopped hanging out with him. You know, he wouldn't have cared, right? If it's like, if she pretended, but then still, you know, was his friend outside the town, but no, she left him. She abandoned him. And everyone abandoned him. Now, the village chief had taken him in like a son. You know, it was his daughter that had been saved from the bear. She was trying to prove herself and had run away from the village to prove herself. And that's who he had saved. Essentially the princess of this village. So they owed a great debt to him. But this is a tribe that believes in pacifism for specific reasons. There are actually really ingrained reasons that would come up later. But this is a tribe that believes in no real outward emotions, that those are detrimental, that those are bad, right? Again, there's like a supernatural reason for it, but I'm not going to get into that right now. So they tried to steer Deimos away. They tried so hard to steer him away. They still trained him. They trained him in their ways, in their combat, in their, hunting. And he became a very skilled hunter. He could disappear into the background, into the forests. You'd never find him. He took to wielding tomahawks. But he's reckless. He was a reckless fighter. He would run in with no care, absolutely no care. And this would continue for a majority of the rest of his adult life. That's where the other scars come from. Deimos was sent away. Essentially, the village couldn't keep him here with such strong ideas of revenge. They're like, please, go, essentially go on a walkabout. They're like, go explore the world. Look for what you're looking for. If you can't get revenge out of your heart, then come back and satisfy those feelings. But they were hoping. They were hoping beyond hope that he would go out into the world and he would find a reason to let it go. Instead, he joined the military. He went straight from there and joined the military. The Civil War was going on. And early in the Civil War, the North kind of thought of it as like a joke, they had more people, they had more funds, they had all the food. In fact, one of the first battles of the Civil War, spectators came out. They came out to watch, which was a mistake for them because when the South started to lose that battle, they kidnapped all the women and children and all the civilian families. So, really right from the outset showed you what that war was going to be. And for the longest time, the northern generals and other military personnel were not taking the war as seriously as they should have been. They were still trying to resolve it more or less peacefully. It was only Sherman that was like, no, they've seceded. They are a separate enemy nation. And if they want to fight, then we need to fight them. We need to burn them. We need to make it so they never want to fight again. That's it. Right? The idea of total war. So, because the North wasn't really taking it seriously and the South had everything to lose, it seemed like it was the underdog. It needed to fight harder. Deimos joined the South. Paradise is located, I want to say Utah or Nevada. We hadn't actually figured out which place. Like, I know I've looked at a map and I've picked somewhere where no town exists. But I can't remember which one now. I'll have to look again. So he was a Confederate soldier, and he followed that same pattern. He ran into battle with his tomahawks and attacked. And actually, during this time, you might think, oh, well, that's insane. Well, actually, one, it would have caught the other side off guard. And two, a lot of the early Sioux Wars, the natives won a lot of those battles because they just waited for the first volley of shots because it took so much time to reload, and bows were still better than guns at that point. So, it wasn't until you started getting like 6-shooters and stuff that it started evening out. But Deimos had a knack for coming back out of it alive, no matter how much damage he took. He was insane. He was skilled. They're like, hey, can you skirt around to the back of the encampment and just stab everybody? And he's like, yeah, I can do that. And he just, yeah, so what ended up happening was he got scouted. There was a military leader, fictional one that I put in here, named Voltaire. Voltaire is of European descent. He's an orc, but he's very civilized orc. He wears nice clothes. He's a Confederate general, right? And he sees the stuff that Deimos is doing. And so he hires him. In secret, Voltaire has been building a team of specifically skilled people to further his own goals in this war. He's using this war as a way to further himself in society. Because at the end of the day, whether the North or the South wins, you still have these military credentials, right? Like General Lee didn't lose any standing. In fact, he came out of that war even more respected, even though he was on the wrong side, right? So Voltaire saw it as a way to up his standing. So he had an adoptive daughter that he had with an experimental long-range rifle. There's a warforged on the team named Bosco. There's a dwarf who's been experimented on named Burton. And there's this series of people. The most influential ones here to Deimos, because Deimos is very antisocial. And he's still very antisocial, even to this point. And that's just what happens when you build this kind of character. But Voltaire took him in, treated him like his own. Voltaire, this is probably the wrong way to say it, but he groomed him to be the man that Voltaire wanted him to be. In a way, he's a mirror to Voltaire himself. And so during the war, they took on more secretive missions, right? But this was also kind of an R&D wing of the military. Like I said, the Civil War had been going on for a lot longer than it happened in real American history. And so they were trying to invent new weapons to attack each other with. And so Voltaire had control of this R&D type facility where they were trying to figure some stuff out. Well, one of the members of the team, so here's the thing. Deimos is kind of like a warlock. Not exactly like a warlock. He's what I think warlock should be, which is basically like a witcher, right? Oh, I'm a warlock, and I get one whole extra spell slot. No, that's stupid. That's stupid. And so there's a classical warlock, the traditional, like, actual what a warlock is. And because of this, I had to come up with a whole history for the Crusades. So the idea here is that during the Crusades, one of the reasons that the Catholics went down there to reclaim the Holy Lands was also to stomp out this Arabic way of making warlocks. Because it's, if you can have a patron deity that gives you power, that implies that their god isn't, the only god or the real god. And so, they stomped out this whole practice of making warlocks. And Voltaire was a little obsessed with resurrecting this warlock concept, right? So, they had this like Ottoman warlock, and it had been passed down through his family, a fragmented ritual to make warlocks. And they had this scientist who was like, well, I can probably, figure out this ritual and add science to it and make it even better. And Deimos went through the experimentation to become a warlock. Again, something similar to a Witcher. Deimos is something like the Witcher and the Punisher and Batman all rolled into one. Now, during this whole process, there was another thing happening. Voltaire's adopted daughter, Atreya, and Deimos kind of hit it off. For as antisocial as this guy was, they really connected. And they fell in love. And Deimos abandoned her. At the end of the war, Voltaire knew his work wasn't done. He was going to keep doing stuff, but he didn't need a wet works team anymore to do it. And he had promised everyone that with his power and influence that he would give them what they needed to accomplish their own personal goals had they joined this wet works team. And so at the end of the war, everyone kind of went their separate ways. And this is Deimos's hardest choice, because he could stay with Atreya and give up on revenge, and he could live a happy, peaceful life. the rest of his life with her. Or he can go back and burn down a town and kill everyone. But he can't let it go. He can't let it go. So, he goes off to get his revenge. Now, at that point, there's still a couple of years before the Western, so before the campaign, what is Deimos doing this whole time? Well, he knows how to fight and he knows how to hunt, but he wants to instill fear. He wants these people to know exactly why they're dying. And he wants these people to know true fear before they go. So let's add some Scarecrow to the mix, if we're using, other characters as an analogy. Deimos becomes a bounty hunter, known as the Grey Ghost. And he's known as the Grey Ghost because nobody's ever seen him, so that makes him a ghost. And most of the time, the demonic form that is taken on is wearing gray. Hearkening back to this Confederate root. And the thing here is that what happened is Deimos does have magic. He has illusion powers on top of his advanced, physical properties. I probably should have mentioned that his gun is magic. Because, like I said, he's a warlock. You're like, well, what is he pacted with? He's pacted with his gun. His gun is a spiritual weapon that he stole from another native tribe that he slaughtered. Part of the ritual to make him the way he is required blood, and lots of it. And Voltaire hates the natives because of his origin, which I'll get into when I do him. But he despises them. And so these other weapons that I showed, the scythe and the spear, so this spear would have been the original form of that weapon that Deimos gets pacted to. It's a transforming weapon that's only goal is to slaughter. That's all it wants to do. So as long as Deimos is killing stuff, it's giving him powers. So, yeah, he became a bounty hunter called the Grey Ghost, and that means that he's connected to the bounty hunter circuit, but nobody actually knows who he is. Most of his enemies either end up being found dead, most of his targets, or, because he's not in it for the money, he's testing. So, or they end up turning themselves in out of fear. Now, I actually have another accessory for Deimos that's basically a whole nother figure. If anyone here is following my Instagram, they'll know I've been building this. I haven't painted it or anything, but I'm making a new version of Deimos's illusory demon. So this demon is not real. It's not a physical being. The idea is that it's a combination of different fears that people can have. Yeah, I'm making it out of the Gamerverse Venom. Isn't that thing cool? Look at that thing. That thing's so cool. Dang it. Yeah, it's so cool. I'm so excited to get this thing done. But, when the Grey Ghost comes to kill you, this is what you see. This is what you see. That is terrifying. I am so happy with how that's going. I found uses for all those stupid little bubble effects Hasbro's given us over the years. You know, the idea here is that those are like smoke coming off of the illusion. So, yeah. So when Deimos enters the campaign, the idea is that he's done with his bounty hunting. He's done with his training. He's done with everything. He's here for information. He's here for the people of paradise. And they will burn.